All right. So you really threw us a curveball this time. Positive thinking.
Yeah, a whole deep dive into the power of a positive mindset.
90 days. Daily exercises.
It is a bit like a mental marathon, isn't it?
Ambitious.
Well, that's Jason Wolbers for you.
It is interesting how he approaches this.
Like a workout routine, but for your mind.
Exactly. And what I find fascinating is that this isn't some, armchair philosopher.
Right.
The guy was out there selling fire safety door to door.
At 18. I mean, talk about starting from the ground up.
What I wonder is what clicked for him back then.
Was there something about those early sales days that really set him on this whole path of positive thinking?
Because you can tell from the book he was already thinking differently even as a teenager.
Even back then, he was fascinated by, what makes people tick,
Motivation.
Motivation, yeah. And that gave him a real edge in a field where, let's be honest, rejection is kind of part of the daily grind.
So he's not just talking about positive thinking as some kind of fluffy concept.
He's showing you how it actually translates into real world.
Tangible results.
Exactly.
But I did notice in the outline he mentioned some...
Oh, right. The tough broke years.
Yeah. So I guess even with the right mindset, building a business is...
Walk in the park.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think that's why this book resonates with so many people. He's honest about the struggles.
Right.
The setbacks. He doesn't sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
He makes it clear that a positive mindset isn't about just denying reality. It's about choosing how you respond to it.
So it's not about pretending everything's perfect.
Right.
It's more about
Yeah.
developing a certain set of tools to deal with the ups and downs.
Yeah, you nailed it. It's like building a toolkit for your mind.
No, that's interesting. And that seems to be his core message.
Absolutely.
That a positive mindset is something you learn, it's not.
You aren't just born with it.
Right.
It's like a muscle.
You have to train it. Okay, so how do we train this mindset muscle?
Well, he doesn't rely on the typical affirmations and positive self-talk stuff.
Yeah.
It goes way beyond that.
Yeah.
He packs this 90-day challenge with some really unique strategies.
Such as?
One that really stood out to me was thinking like a child.
I like where this is going.
Yeah.
Because we've all heard think outside the box, but
Right.
thinking like a child, there's something so freeing about that.
Yeah.
What does he say about?
Well, he argues that kids, they haven't learned all the limitations.
Oh, right.
The adults, we put on ourselves.
So they approach things with...
It's just this incredible sense of possibility,
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, why not?
I remember as a kid, I thought I could be an astronaut and chef and a rock star all at the same time. And then somewhere along the line,
Somewhere along the way, yeah.
all that gets chipped away.
You start thinking, oh, I can't do that. Or that's not realistic.
That boundless enthusiasm,
It goes away.
just gone. And that's what he wants us to rediscover.
Exactly. He actually has specific exercises to help you reframe those limitations
Oh, wow.
that we've internalized over the years.
Okay, so we're rewiring our brains to think bigger and bolder, but how do we make those big dreams a reality?
Well, you can't just
Can't just be all in your head.
seek your way to success, right?
Right.
And that's where the power of repetition comes in.
Everyone knows practice makes perfect, but how does he apply that to a positive mindset?
Well, he uses a really simple analogy. Learning to ride a bike.
Oh, yeah.
Remember falling down, getting back up, trying again.
Scraped knees. Badges of honor.
Exactly. You learn by doing, not just by
Not by reading about it.
thinking about it, right?
But how do you apply that same principle to something as, abstract as mindset?
Well, he argues that any skill, mental or physical, requires consistent practice.
So we're talking about building habits and routines.
Yes.
Sticking with them, even when it's tough. That's
The unglamorous part of success.
Yeah, the part people don't really like to talk about. And I'm guessing this ties in with
Oh, yeah, big time.
the whole championship habits section.
Absolutely. He dives deep into those, unseen routines and practices, the things that separate the high achievers from everyone else.
And what's his take on that?
He argues that success isn't just about talent. It's not about luck.
Mm-hmm.
It's about developing those habits.
Okay.
The habits that actually drive consistent progress.
So it's like training for a marathon. It's not just about the finish line. It's about
The daily dedication.
the daily grind.
Yeah.
But let's be honest, most of us really struggle with staying motivated. So what does he say about it?
Oh, he addresses that head on
Yeah.
with the feel the fear, do it anyway approach.
Now, that's a mantra I think we could all use a little more of in our lives.
Right.
But how do you, because everyone's fears are different.
Well, of course. Yeah.
So how do you provide a framework that's actually applicable to everyone?
He starts by acknowledging that fear is like a universal human experience.
Okay.
But he challenges us to really identify our specific fears.
Whether it's
Like fear of failure.
rejection.
Rejection.
Is unknown.
The unknown.
Wow.
All of it.
Yeah.
And then confront them head on.
That's easier said than done, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why he provides practical strategies for managing that fear and taking action despite it.
So it's not about ignoring the fear. It's about equipping yourself.
It's about working with it, learning to manage it.
Okay. But in today's world, a lot of our fears and anxieties, they stem from online interaction. Social media can be
Tell me about it.
a minefield.
The complete minefield.
So does he address that at all?
He does.
Yeah.
Head on. With this idea of responding versus reacting.
Now that sounds like a crucial distinction.
It is. It's all about choosing thoughtful responses rather than just
knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, those knee-jerk, impulsive reactions, especially in the online world.
Because online, things can escalate so quickly.
Oh, in an instant.
It's like, the Wild West out there.
It really is.
So he's encouraging us to pause and reflect before we...
Yes, absolutely.
That send button.
Craft your responses mindfully, even when you're faced with, negativity or provocation.
That's a valuable skill, I think, both online
and
offline. But he doesn't just offer abstract concepts, right?
No, not at all.
He actually uses a lot of anecdotes and stories in the book.
Master storyteller.
Because I'm always a sucker for a good story.
Me too.
I remember seeing one in the outline. It was the story about this student who vowed to never.
Oh, yeah. The one who swore off reading forever.
The student who swore off reading. Okay, now I have to hear this. What happened?
So it turned out this student had a really, really bad experience with a textbook back in school. Like one of those super dense, dry textbooks,
Yeah, the kind that makes you want to... Yeah.
Just give up on reading altogether.
So he basically associated reading with just boredom and frustration.
Right.
But later in life, he realized that limiting himself to that one single negative experience was actually robbing him of like a world of knowledge and enjoyment.
That's such a great illustration of how we can get stuck in these limiting beliefs.
Totally.
Based on,
just one experience.
One bad experience.
Exactly. It's like he's saying, don't let one bad apple spoil the whole bunch.
I like that.
There's a whole orchard out there waiting to be discovered.
Speaking of discovering new things, I noticed in the outline something about the science behind.
Oh, yeah, the exercise and mood connection.
Yes. I've always been curious about that. What does he say about that?
Well, he highlights the power of exercise to boost your mood, reduce anxiety, even alleviate pain.
Okay.
He talks about the runner's high and the release of endorphins.
The famous runner's high, I've heard about it, but never quite experienced it myself. You got to push yourself harder on that next run.
Maybe I do. But how does he connect this to developing a positive mindset?
He emphasizes that taking care of your physical health is essential for cultivating a positive mental state.
So it's all connected.
It's all interconnected. Mind, body, the whole 9 yards.
Okay.
And he even suggests a really simple tool that we can all implement right away.
What's that?
The gratitude journal.
I've heard about those. They seem so simple,
Right.
but do they actually make a difference?
He argues that consistently practicing gratitude can have a profound impact on your outlook.
How so?
Well, it shifts your focus from what you lack to what you have.
Okay.
It helps you appreciate the good in your life, even when things are tough.
Makes sense. It's so easy to get caught up in
no.
the negative, especially these days.
Yeah, especially these days.
But actively seeking out things to be grateful for, that's a really powerful
The real game changer.
way to reframe your perspective. But some people are struggling with
Of course.
much deeper issues than just a lack of gratitude.
Absolutely.
And he doesn't shy away from that, does he?
No, he doesn't. In fact, he shares a very personal anecdote about his own struggles with anxiety.
Does he?
Yeah, he even talks about buying an anxiety program on his credit card because he was so desperate for relief.
He's really putting himself out there.
He is.
But it also makes him so relatable.
Exactly. I think that vulnerability is what makes his message so powerful.
Because it's like he's saying, look, I've been there, I get it,
I've been in the trenches.
and here's what helped me.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked about thinking like a child, the power of repetition, building those championship habits, facing our fears, responding thoughtfully instead of
not reacting,
taking care of our physical and mental health.
It's a whole person approach.
It is. It's very holistic. But I'm curious, out of everything we've talked about so far, what's resonating with you the most? What's grabbing your attention and making you think, hey, I could actually apply this in my own life?
Honestly, for me, it's the humor. Like how he manages to weave humor into this whole self-improvement thing.
Right.
It makes it so much more approachable, especially if...
It doesn't feel so heavy.
Yeah, like you're not being lectured to, you know.
Because personal growth, let's face it, it can be...
It's messy.
Yeah, it's messy. But you mentioned faith earlier, and that's not something you typically hear in a self-help book.
It's not your typical Sunday school definition either.
So how does he approach that?
He actually presents two distinct ways to think about faith.
Okay.
The first is faith in ourselves and others.
Now, that's something I think we all struggle with.
Oh, absolutely. Especially when, you know, we've been hurt or disappointed.
Because we all make mistakes.
We do. We let people down. We get let down.
Right.
It's part of being human. But he stresses the importance of forgiveness.
Not just forgiving others, but also
ourselves.
Ourselves. Okay.
Yeah, because if you're constantly dwelling on past mistakes, it's like
you're carrying around baggage.
Exactly.
Weighing you down.
You can't move forward with all that baggage.
So forgiveness is almost like a key to...
It's like unlocking that freedom to grow.
Okay. And what was the second type of faith?
The second type is more about believing in things before you see them.
So having that hope for the future... Even when
things are tough.
Okay, I really connect with that.
Yeah.
It's that like glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel.
It is.
Keeps you going.
Yeah.
But it's hard to maintain that when life throws those.
Oh, those curveballs.
Yeah, those curveballs.
Yeah, life loves to throw those.
It does.
But he connects this type of faith to the power of a positive mindset.
Okay.
He argues that when you have that underlying belief, that hope, it actually fuels your actions, your choices.
It gives you that resilience to keep going.
Exactly. Even when you face setbacks.
So faith is almost like the foundation upon which you build.
It's the root system that allows you to weather the storms.
I like that analogy. Now, he also talks about decision making.
Yeah.
How does faith play into that?
He encourages us to make decisions based on faith, not fear.
Okay, but how do you distinguish between a decision that's based on faith and one that's just, I don't know, reckless?
He acknowledges that it's a delicate balance. It's not about being blindly optimistic or just like throwing caution to the wind.
Ignoring the potential risks.
Exactly. It's about weighing the risks against the potential rewards.
Yeah.
And then trusting your gut.
So being informed, but also
being informed.
Trusting your intuition.
Trusting your intuition, yeah.
Okay.
Making that choice that aligns with your goals, even if it's a little scary.
That's pretty empowering.
It is. And it makes you think, what are we letting fear hold us back from?
What opportunities are we missing because we're just too afraid to take that
leap?
Yeah, that leap. But all these big life decisions, it can feel really
overwhelming.
Yeah, overwhelming. How does he suggest we even approach that process?
He talks about this idea of winning the day.
Winning the day.
Okay. Yeah, it's about focusing on what you can control, making the most of each 24 hours.
Instead of getting bogged down by the
big picture. Exactly.
The enormity of it all. I like that.
And a powerful mindset shift.
Breaking it down.
So instead of thinking, oh, I need to lose 50 pounds, it's what healthy choices can I make today?
It's about those daily wins.
Exactly. It's about those small victories that ultimately lead to the big transformations.
So it's building momentum through consistent action.
Exactly.
But even positive change can be scary. So how does he address that resistance to stepping outside our comfort zones?
He reminds us that change equals progress.
Okay.
And it's natural to resist change. It can be uncomfortable. It can be disruptive.
But he argues that it's often necessary for growth.
We often cling to what's familiar, even if
it's not serving us anymore.
Right. But how do you know when it's time to embrace change?
He says to pay attention to those feelings of discomfort, of restlessness.
Okay.
That's a sign that you've outgrown your current situation.
So it's time to evolve.
It's time to evolve.
Okay.
He even takes it a step further with this concept of living like you were dying.
Wow. That's a pretty intense.
It is, but it's about appreciating the preciousness of time, making the most of each day.
It's like stop and smell the roses.
Exactly.
Savor those simple pleasures. But it's hard to do that when you're
stressed or just
exhausted.
Exhausted, yeah. He acknowledges that life can be challenging,
Right.
but he argues that we always have a choice.
In how we respond.
Exactly. He encourages us to adopt an attitude of gratitude even
when things are tough.
Even when things are tough.
It's about finding those silver linings, even in the darkest clouds. Okay, we've covered so much. We've talked about the role of faith, making decisions based on courage, winning the day. What's resonating with you? What's sparking that, aha, I can use this moment for you?
For me, it's the practicality of it all. You know, it's not just about like some vague notion of changing your mindset. He gives you actual tools.
Yeah.
Concrete things you can start doing today. Like he talks about the simple act of making a to-do list.
The classic to-do list.
Right. But prioritizing.
But even making a list can feel so overwhelming sometimes.
Totally.
I'm definitely guilty of letting those lists pile up.
We've all been there.
And then it just creates more stress.
He connects that back to his do-it-now philosophy.
Oh, interesting.
He argues that procrastination, a lot of times it's really a symptom of fear or self-doubt. So by tackling those important tasks head-on, you're not only getting things done, but you're actually building momentum.
Okay.
And boosting your confidence.
So it's like a positive feedback loop.
Yeah.
The more you accomplish,
the more motivated you feel.
the more you want to tackle the next thing.
Okay. But life isn't always about checking things off a list. You know, sometimes it throws you those curveballs.
It does.
You have to
improvise.
Yeah, you have to improvise.
Okay.
So how does he address those unexpected challenges?
He tells a story about his brother and sister-in-law.
Okay.
They experienced a really devastating personal tragedy.
Oh, wow.
But instead of letting that grief and despair consume them, they actually channeled that pain into creating a foundation to help others who are going through similar struggles.
That's amazing.
It is.
Turning a loss into something so positive.
It's incredible.
What's the takeaway there?
I think he's showing us that even in the darkest of times, we have a choice.
Okay.
We can either let those challenges define us,
Right.
or we can use them as fuel.
Fuel for growth.
For growth, for positive change. It's about finding that meaning and purpose even in the midst of adversity.
So reframing those challenges as opportunities.
Exactly. For becoming stronger, more resilient.
Yeah, that's powerful. Now, what about balance? Does he talk about that?
He does. He emphasizes the importance of finding that balance.
Yeah.
You know, working hard is essential.
Right.
But so is making time for play.
For relaxation.
For those things that recharge your batteries.
It's like they say, work hard, play harder.
Right. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Exactly. You need time to unwind and disconnect and just do those things
that bring you joy.
Yeah, that bring you joy. And remind us that life is a journey.
Not a destination.
Not a destination. It's about embracing the ups and downs.
The wins and the losses.
He even has a chapter called Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn.
I love that.
It's a great reminder because it's so easy to get caught up in...
Oh, the pursuit of perfection.
Yeah.
And the fear of failure.
But he says that those setbacks...
They're often our greatest teachers?
They are. But he doesn't just focus on external achievement.
No, he also talks about self-love.
How does he define that?
He makes it very clear that self-love is not about narcissism or ego.
Okay.
It's about recognizing your own worth, valuing yourself.
Treating yourself with kindness.
With kindness and compassion.
Yeah. It's like they say, you can't love others until you love yourself.
Exactly.
But how do you cultivate that self-acceptance?
He connects it to the idea of being the change.
Interesting.
He argues that we can't wait for the world to change.
Right.
We have to start with ourselves.
Okay.
So by embodying love and kindness and compassion, we actually radiate those qualities outwards.
So it's like a ripple effect.
Exactly. By cultivating self-love, we create a more loving world.
That's beautiful. But does he offer any practical advice on how to do that?
He does. He talks about self-care, setting boundaries, speaking kindly to yourself.
Celebrating your accomplishments.
Celebrating your accomplishments, big or small.
Yeah. Treating yourself as you would a
dear friend.
A dear friend. That's good. It feels like we're nearing the end of our deep dive here.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Does he have like a final call to action?
He does. And it's a powerful one. It's simply, what are you waiting for?
Oh, I like that.
It's a challenge to take everything we've talked about, all these insights and strategies, and put them into practice. Because knowledge without action is meaningless.
Right. It's not enough to just read the book.
Not along.
Not along, yeah. It's about taking that next step.
And creating real change.
And creating real change in your life. And that's something only you can do. But the power of a positive mindset focuses on the individual. What about the impact our mindsets have on the people around us? Think about that ripple effect. How does that positive or negative energy spread outward? That's something for you to think about. Until next time, keep diving deep and stay curious.